As you know, and as we've been discussing over the last couple of weeks, when Jane Austen died, she left behind an unfinished book, Sanditon, which you have already read and you've already worked on it on our WordPress site. Now, remember, the main characters in this novel include Mr. Parker and Lady Denham, who are both local landowners and who are trying to establish the Sussex town of Sanditon as a health retreat where Regency men and women could be rejuvenated by healthy seawater and breezes. Also, we have Charlotte Haywood and Clara Breton, young women with connections but little wealth, and Miss Lamb, a biracial yet wealthy heiress, the illegitimate daughter of a West Indian plantation owner. And as I'm sure you've already experienced, when this incomplete novel, when it ends abruptly, it still tantalizingly promises both a traditional Austenian tale, which would focus on the complications that arise when young but relatively poor single women socialize with the rich and the aristocratic, and also perhaps a radical expose on race relations as compounded by Britain's at that time continuing practice of slave ownership in the colonies. Following Austen's death, these 12 chapters were not published until 1925, and while having inspired many writers to attempt completion of the novel, they've not been as popular an inspiration for film or digital remediations. And here is a meme actually that was created by some of my students in another class where, they took a modern day image and overlaid it with this text. The moment you finish Sanditon and realize it is a fragment. But Pemberley Digital has changed all of this. They were the first to create the transmedia adaptation of Austen's unfinished novel, which is the series that we're going to be watching for this class. Now, just as a little background information, Pemberley Digital is an innovative web video production company that specializes in the adaptation of classic works onto the new media format. The company utilizes not only YouTube, but other social media platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Lookbook, and others to tell an enriched and immersive story that transcends across multiple formats. And in 2013, they created their first transmedia adaptation of they created their second transmedia adaptation of an Austen novel, Welcome to Sanditon, taking license to incorporate characters from the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. Now, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries was their first transmedia adaptation. They adapted Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and that series was incredibly popular and actually won the first Emmy Award that was ever given out to a transmedia production. So that came out in 2012, and it was critically acclaimed. Now, back to Welcome to Sanditon. Following Pemberley Digital's transmedia adaptation in 2014, Chris Brindle released Sanditon, The Plot Develops. This was a short film that highlights the racism and the misogyny inherent in aristocratic British marriage traditions. And currently, Jim O'Hanlon is filming an adaptation of the novel, which is scheduled for release later this year. I am anxiously awaiting it. And this adaptation stars Charlotte Rampling as the matriarch, Lady Denham. Now, this sudden and mounting interest in Sanditon suggests the increasing prominence of Pemberley Digital and transmedia storytelling as a proving ground for visual as well as written adaptations of other texts now that we're in the 21st century. Their transmedia adaptation was the first primarily visual retelling of Sanditon, and in it they move Austen's tale from England to California, from the 19th century to the 21st century, and re-envision all the aristocrats as influential government servants, and they also re-envision the gentility as capitalists who are all using the Domino app to publicize their public service and professional work. And here you can see the characters that we're going to be meeting. Gigi Darcy here replaces Charlotte. We still have Clara Breton. We still have Edward Denham over here. And then down here, Mr. Parker becomes Mayor Tom Parker, and Miss Lamb gets split into two different characters. I think that's an interesting sort of visual pun, because Miss Lamb was biracial, and now we have a brother and sister duo. So we have two races. We have two siblings. We have Beau Griffith, and then we have Letitia Griffiths, who is also goes by the nickname Griff. So, just to recap, and this is some review of what we've been reading in our textbook. What is digital storytelling and what is transmedia storytelling? Basically, there are a few vital characteristics of each of these terms, and you can see the outline again on digital storytelling in pages 17 through 19 in your textbook. So according to Carolyn Miller in Digital Storytelling, A Creator's Guide to Interactive Entertainment, digital storytelling must have a narrative, include characters, and be interactive, nonlinear, immersive, participatory, and navigable. Now, you'll see that the first two characteristics, again, these are standard, they're traditional. Stories must have a story, they must have a narrative, and they must have characters. The last part of the list is what's specifically interesting to us here in the 21st century, because they all emphasize, these characteristics all emphasize users' participation, and users is a word that we use instead of readers, because again, when you work with the transmedia, or when you experience the transmedia series of digital storytelling, you actually have to interact with it. You can enter it from several different points. That's what non-linear means. And, unlike a book, you don't just go from page 1 to page 2 to page 3. You might get lost. You might jump from hyperlink to hyperlink. And you might not even know that part of the story is there because it's non-linear. And so users really have to do some digging around to discover what's going on in the narrative. I've assigned you the 27 web videos to watch, but I also strongly encourage you to go through the Facebook feeds, the Twitter feeds that are associated with it. Look up the characters on Instagram. Pimberley Digital has archived a lot of this on their website. But if you actually go to Twitter, you can see some of the conversations that have additional information from what was archived by Pimberley Digital, and so they tend to make a lot more sense. So it needs to be immersive, and by immersive it means that you get really caught up in the narrative, and also that there's a blending between fact and fiction. I'm going to revisit this in the future, but one thing about transmedia storytelling and digital storytelling that's really interesting is that a lot of times the users have a hard time remembering that the characters are being portrayed by actors and that these aren't real people. So it needs to be participatory. The users need to be able to interact with the text, and therefore it needs to be navigable. You need to be able to get around within the site and go different places according to your wishes. It's not just that you have to follow page by page an order that's already been arranged for you. Alright, so that's digital storytelling. Additionally, transmedia stories must take place over at least 3 different platforms, only one of which must be digital and interactive, which means that transmedia stories must include at least one, if not more, Web 2.0 platforms. And Web 2.0 simply refers to what we're very used to these days, where you get on the internet and not only can you read and view what's already there, but that you, the user, can also contribute text. You can like things, you can unlike things, you can add comments, you can add images, you can add videos, depending on what site you're using. So Web 2.0 means that not only can you view what's on the screen, but you can also add to it. So the platforms that we're most familiar with there, all of us across the board, these are going to be very familiar names: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc., through which users may participate, but transmedia stories may also include analog, print, or even live components. So the 3 platforms do not all have to be digital, but at least one must be digital. So what I'm going to focus on here for the rest of my conversation, setting this up for you, is how the interactive, immersive, and participatory components of Welcome to Sanditon in some ways undermine the longevity, the potential of this transmedia narrative. As Miller points out again in Digital Storytelling, our textbook, Whenever a new medium, such as the internet, is introduced as a vehicle for telling stories, there tends to be 3 phases. The first phase is repurposing, or taking an older medium or just copying it wholesale into the new medium. For example, when Austen's novels are simply digitized as ebooks. And since Austen's works are out of copyright, which means that people who use her book don't need to pay a portion of the profits back to Austen herself, who is dead, or any of her surviving relatives. We here in the 21st century have benefited from having her entire catalog made available for free, and at times as exact copies of expensive editions. The third and final phase, and yes, I did skip over the second, I'll be getting back to that. The third and final phase is the creation of a whole new genre, especially crafted for the new medium. But Welcome to Sanditon is not an example of this. So we're going to back up and focus on the second phase, which is adapting or taking an older medium and using it as a vehicle to highlight the different capabilities of the new medium. So taking the analog print novel, which is a medium, and then adapting it and updating it for the new digital world. So you're going to see a lot of changes that happen in the series from the original novel to the transmedia story. So Pemberley Digital's Welcome to Sanditon not only updates the tale, but adds video, sound, and social media into the mix. And so this is a perfect example of adaptation according to Miller. In this paper, therefore, for the rest of this talk, I'm going to focus on the benefits and limitations of the second phase, specifically how Pemberley Digital's transmedia adaptation of Austen's print novel falls flat, specifically by how the series' interactive, immersive, and participatory elements complicate users' long-term enjoyment of this transmedia narrative. Now, right now you might be thinking, if this isn't such a great example, why are we going to be watching it? Why are we dedicating time to it? And that's because a lot of times I think it's very beneficial not just to look at perfect examples of a tale, but also to look at imperfect examples. And this is going to become really important to us as a class as we move forward and start making our own videos. I'm going to be talking about what it is that I think is falling flat in Pemberley Digital and where they went wrong, so that we can hopefully sidestep some of those issues as we progress forward. Of course, so one of the best ways to figure out what mistakes you don't want to make is by looking at other people's mistakes. And when you're introducing a new medium into popular discourse, into popular ways of telling a story, people are going to make mistakes. And this team of people, they're really forward thinking, they're very progressive, they're very talented, but they're not above falling flat on their face a couple of times. So I'm going to be explaining to you what it is that I think we can learn from. So we read the Q&A from co-creator Jay Bushman for last week, and I want to point your attention back to a couple things he said. First of all, he recounts that, quote, we, Pemberley Digital, had made a deal for a second year-long series after Lizzie Bennet Diaries was done, and we knew that we needed time to devote to the planning of that, but we didn't want to take this amazing audience that we built and, tell them to go away. They, the fans, were all there, and they all wanted more content, end of quote. So, for their primary platform, Pemberley Digital created this YouTube web series in which Gigi Darcy, the character from the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, helps to protect Clara's ice cream business from being overtaken by the male government officials, specifically Tom Parker and Edward Denham. And she does this through the use of her automatic video editing application, Domino. Now, so one thing that we need to make clear right away is that Domino never existed. The team did not make the Domino app. They kind of tried to sidestep this plot device that they'd come up with. That there was this automatic editing Domino app that anyone could use to empower them, but didn't really exist. I really wish they had done it. It could have been useful, but unfortunately they did not. Alright, so I'm running out of time for this video, so I'm going to pause here and pick up and continue this discussion in the next video.